Hey there, folks. I wanted to make this video to talk about a coding project that I've been working on recently. It's an idea that I had very early on when I was first learning how to code, and so it's gone through a couple of different iterations as I keep coming back to it. Basically, it's an app that helps you track your finances and spending habits. Now, there are plenty of other fully developed apps that already do this, but most of them either cost money that I don't want to spend or they just don't give me quite as much control over the data that I'd like. A lot of them do a pretty good job at categorizing your transactions, like as groceries or gas, but they don't really give you much control over what those categories are or how those transactions are categorized, which is what I want to do with my app. So, just about every bank lets you go online and download your account activity as a CSV file. Those files will typically contain the date, an amount, and some sort of description for each transaction from within a certain time period. Now, the descriptions aren't always super clear, but they do usually have enough recognizable words in them that you can figure out what the transaction was for. For example, if we look at some of this dummy data I have here, which is modeled after real data from Wells Fargo, there's a lot of numbers and truncated words, but you can still tell what the description is for, like Target or Sprouts Farmers Market or Home Depot, etc. So, the general idea behind the app is that you can upload this CSV files and the app stores the transactions in a database. Then you can go through the transactions and categorize them. As you're going through them, you can save certain identifying phrases like Target or Sprouts Farmers MKT, correlate it to a specific category, and then any future transactions you upload that also have that phrase in them will automatically be categorized. And then when you're done, you can see things like how much you're spending each month on your electric bill, groceries, gas, or whatever other categories you created. So this is actually my third time that I've created this app. The first two times were a lot earlier on in my journey of learning how to code and were just local apps written with Python and MySQL. This time though, I wanted to make something web-based so that my wife could also use it without me having to spin up the database on my computer. I've already put a ton of work into this version and I'm actually actively using it as well, even though I wouldn't consider it to be completely finished. This version is written in the Pern stack, so it's a PostgreSQL database with a custom Express.js API running on Node and a React front end. It's very JavaScript heavy, but that's the stack I learned at bootcamp, so that's what I decided to use. So I will go ahead and spin up the server. I'll show you what I've got so far. So the first thing we see here is a login screen. You're automatically redirected here if you're not logged in, and right now the only two accounts are for myself and my wife. Every API call, aside from the one to log in, requires authentication. You wouldn't necessarily be able to steal my money or identity from the data that you can find on the site, but it's still fairly private, so I wanted to be sure to keep it behind some sort of security barrier. So once I'm logged in, we are met with this absolutely stunning home screen. Obviously, I've not populated this yet. I'm still pretty focused on the primary functionality at this moment. I have some dummy data that's already loaded into my development database. So we can start by looking at the All Transactions tab here. So everything is laid out in a table format. We have the date of the transaction, what that description was, the amount, category, and account, and then this U, which I'll get to that in a second. You can select any one of these rows, and these two buttons up here will highlight. We have the delete button to obviously delete the payment, and if I click on that, it shows this pop-up modal here to ask if we're sure we want to delete, and then we can confirm or close. And then we have this mark uncommon button, which is essentially an edit button, and it does the same thing. Click on it, and a pop-up modal appears, shows us some transaction details, and asks if we want to toggle the transaction to uncommon, which is what this U is over here. So the X means that it is not uncommon or common. The uncommon flag was something that I added to this most recent version so that you could flag a transaction as well uncommon so that it wouldn't be used in any average calculations. For example, a couple months ago, I took out a big chunk of money and I paid off my car loan about a year early. but I don't necessarily plan to be paying off car loans every month. So I'm able to flag that transaction as uncommon so that when my monthly averages are calculated, it's not taken into consideration. So if we actually do select this one at the top and we go to delete and we actually click delete, you'll see in the bottom right, this little green toast pops up, just went away. That told us that the transaction was successfully deleted, and then it disappears from our table view here. Same thing would happen if I were to go to Mark Uncommon and click Save. We get a little successfully updated transaction flag down here. And we can see the table updated, and we now have a check mark here under the U column. So we also have the same types of pages for our categories and identifiers where we can see all of the categories that we've created so far and all of the identifiers that are associated with some of those categories. They all act the same way where we can select one and then we can either delete it or edit it in some way. For identifiers, you can change the category that it's associated with. And then for the categories, you can either change the name of the category itself. And then if you want to give it a different parent or general category. I have the categories laid out in a 2-tier system. So we have bills here and car payment. These are our parent categories. And then phone, which is under bills, is a subcategory of bills. You can also see on the right here, we have this budget column. Some of them have been filled out and have like a budget. So for groceries, a budget of $700, it's per month. Right now, this does not do anything and has no significance whatsoever, but I do eventually want to, work that into the app in some way. So if we want to actually upload some new data, we can go over here to upload. And then you can see that we have a drop down for account. And this is going to have all of the different bank accounts that I have configured. So right now we've got, JPMC Credit, Discover Credit, and then a few others. It's all dummy data. So I can select a specific account like some bank checking, and then I can hit browse and it'll open a file selector. And I'm going to select our dummy data here. And then I actually need to open the console for this. And so when I click upload, you can see in the console here, 6 transactions successfully added to the database. Now, obviously in the future, I do want that feedback to be somewhere on the actual page itself to tell the user that the upload was successful and how many transactions were added to the database. But for the time being, that just kind of lives in the dev console. And the reason that you need to select a specific account, like some bank checking or some bank credit, is because different banks typically have different formats for those CSV files that you can download. So in our dummy data, which is modeled after Wells Fargo, we have the date here in the first column. We have the amount here in the second column. The third and fourth are kind of useless. And then the description is in the fifth. So I have some import settings that designate, what information is from which column. And when I'm uploading a CSV from JP Morgan Chase or uploading a CSV from Discover Credit, that layout is different. And so the system needs to know what categories it can find those specific data points from. So now that we've uploaded a few new transactions, we can go back to all transactions and we can see all of these April transactions here. These are all of the ones that were in that dummy data file. And we can see under category that the Netflix and Sprouts categories have already been populated for a couple of these. Most likely because the descriptions matched some sort of identifier. So I know that we have Sprouts Farmers and Netflix somewhere in the identifiers. Let's see, we have Sprouts Farmers, which matches the category Sprouts, and then Netflix, which matches Netflix. So those 2 transactions were automatically updated. But as for the rest of them, we can go to this categorize transactions page. And this will show us a table of all of the transactions that were uploaded that have not yet been categorized. So we can click on one, like the second one here, and this form will pop up. We can toggle it as an uncommon transaction. We can optionally add an identifying phrase, which I'm going to do for this one. And I'm going to put home. You can see in my typos, it actually gives some feedback if the phrase actually matches the transaction and it is case sensitive. So Home Depot, and let's see if we have a good category for this already. Not really. So I'm going to go ahead and add a new primary category, and we're going to call this home supplies. And we're going to select our type. We have 3 different category types. There's income, expenses, and transfers. This is going to be under expenses. And then we can save the category, successfully add a new category. And then I'm not going to add a new subcategory or select any of them from here. There aren't any to choose from at this time anyway. And I'm going to go ahead and click categorize transaction. And what that did, we can see it with the toast in the corner where they just went away, is that added a new identifier, Home Depot, and associated it with the category that I had selected, home supplies. And then it applied that identifier and category to all of the uncategorized transactions that met the identifier. So we had two of them. And even though I was only categorizing one of them, it automatically categorized the other one as home supplies as well. And then we could just finish this out real quick. So we can say worker place, and we'll put this under restaurants, categorize, and then let's do Target. Let's go ahead and put this one under home supplies, but we'll add a new subcategory of Target. I want to know how much money I'm spending at Target a month. We can categorize, and we're all good to go. It's cleared out. So now that everything has been categorized, we can go to the data tabs over here, and we have totals by month and averages over time. They're exactly what it says on the box. So totals by month, it defaults to the oldest month. And in the dropdown, you'll actually notice that April is not here. That is due to a time zone related bug, because when I first built this version of the app, I was living in Colorado in Mountain Time, but I recently moved to California in Pacific Time, and the transaction timestamps are time zone specific. So when I truncate the timestamps to the month, it will truncate an April transaction to April 1st at midnight Mountain Time, which is technically March 31st at 11 p.m. Pacific Time. So all that dummy data that is under April, we're actually going to find it here under March. And there's not much to see here. We just have our groceries, our home supplies, restaurants, subscriptions. And then I can hit this toggle up here to show the different subcategories that were under the general categories, and it gives more of a breakdown. So for our home supplies, we have $43.77 at Target, and then $55.91 at other, which is those Home Depot transactions. But because I didn't give them a subcategory, they're just going to go under other. And then we can go over to averages over time, and let's just kind of show all time. So quote unquote December 2024 to quote unquote March 2025. And we can see we have three different tables that pop up for transfers, expenses, and income. And there are different columns for each month. And again, the data is kind of bugged out because of the time zone issue. You can see there's nothing for February, but regardless, you can kind of get the general idea. Is here's how much was for December, here's how much for January, and here's how much for March, and then here's the average divided amongst those 3 or 4 months. I promise you that this works just fine when you're in the correct time zone. I just need to change it so that it's not time zone specific or time specific at all. It should really only be associated with the date rather than the time. And then circling back to something I covered earlier in the video, any transactions that are marked as uncommon are not calculated here. They will not show up in the totals for their respective month, and they will not be considered in the calculation for the average in the average column here. This tab is reserved specifically for the transactions that you would consider regular monthly spending. Your groceries, your gas for your car, your electric bill, all those things that you can expect to pay every month as opposed to once in a blue moon. So aside from fixing that time zone issue, there are a couple other features that I want to add, and then I want to kind of build upon this app and make it a bit more general, because right now it's very much geared towards being used by only myself and my wife. But I would love to make it something where anyone can create an account and start uploading their own data. First, as far as quality of life goes, in the all transactions and then the categories and identifiers pages, I want to add some ways to filter and sort these lists. Right now, they're all sorted in a default way, and there's no way to filter on anything specific. So like with all transactions, primarily when it comes to filters, I want to be able to select what category and what month that I want to see, or maybe a range of amounts, anything like that. And then be able to sort them differently. So I can, click on the amount column header here, and it'll sort from the lowest to the highest, or vice versa. Same thing for, the date. I can see it from oldest to newest or newest to oldest just by clicking on the word date up here. Then, in order to make this usable for the general public, there's going to have to be some sort of way that you can create your own account. Right now, there is just the login page that we see here, and there's only two accounts, but there's no register button or anything like that. So I want to add a registration form and a couple API calls that will add a new user to the database and store a hashed password for anyone that wants to use the app. And then on the backend side of things, I'll need to edit the database so that all of the transactions and categories and identifiers have a user ID column so that when the API goes and requests information to display on the actual web page, it will only show me the transactions that are specific to that user. It's not going to show me somebody else's transactions or their categories or identifiers or anything like that. And then on top of that, right now, the accounts like the Some Bank Checking or JPMC Credit, all of that is currently hard coded. So it's just data that I kind of manually added to the database. So I'll need to make a way that anybody who is just registering to use the product can add their own bank accounts to associate with their transactions and use when they go to the upload tab and they select their account from this list here. Now, earlier I mentioned that different banks have different formats for the CSV files. So when a user creates a new bank account to add to this drop-down menu, they're also going to need to be able to create their own import configurations that align with the CSV files that they get from their banks. I think all the import configuration is going to need is a column index for the amount, the transaction description, and the date. And then something I have noticed between different CSV files is some of them will show the amounts in negative, like the Wells Fargo ones do here. And then some of them show them in positive when they need to be negative. So there would need to be some sort of configuration to, swap that amount. Typically, it's going to show a negative if it's like a checking or savings account, and then it'll show positive if it's like a credit card account. Because in those cases, when you buy something, you're actually adding to the credit owed to the bank. And so it might show up as positive. Whereas when you upload your data to the platform, you would want that to be displayed as a negative value because that's money that you spent. You just use a credit card instead of your debit card. Finally, as I mentioned in the beginning, I definitely want to fill out our home screen. I am kind of thinking that I want this to be like a quick view dashboard, maybe something like a pie chart that shows the most recently uploaded month in review by category, or perhaps a data table that shows you what's over budget for the month. Which, of course, if I'm going to do that, I also need to implement budgeting into the system somewhere, which is definitely something I want to do. But I would say that is more of a stretch goal. Everything else that I have listed out already is kind of more of my primary focus, and I think I can tackle budgeting after that. But I think that sort of table would definitely be useful to see on the home screen. Ideally, I just want this populated with whatever a user might want to see as soon as they open the page. Like maybe they just need to quickly reference what their budget looks like and then move on with their day. So, with that said, I definitely have my hands full with this project. There's a lot that I want to add to it. I really enjoy working on it. At this point in time, I don't have the code on a public repository, but as soon as I do, I will add a link to that in the description of this video or maybe a pinned comment. I do plan on making more videos on this in the future as I add some of these updates if you're interested, so please let me know. I also have one other project that I am working on somewhat actively. I'd say it's pretty on and off. It is a real-time strategy game written in Java, so completely different from this. It is more or less kind of like a very, very rudimentary and pixel art style hybrid of Civilization and Warcraft, where you're essentially building up a base and trying to attack the enemy base in a medieval fantasy genre. It's all super basic and rudimentary. I'm not using a game engine or anything like that. I'm building all of it from scratch, just more so as a way of learning as opposed to trying to reinvent the wheel. But I would love to make some videos and show off my progress on that project as well. Definitely let me know if you'd be interested in seeing something like that in the comments. But other than that, that's all I have for you today. I really appreciate you checking out my first of hopefully many developers vlogs, and I'll see you in the next one.